Welcome to International Quality Month. I'm here with Heather Olson this morning to talk about quality. My name is Anthea Dransfield. I work for Diligent Pharma, and I've got about 32 years in the industry, both working in operations and quality. Heather, please introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is Heather Olson. I've been in the quality field for over 25 years, focused in food manufacturing, drug packaging, GLP, GCP, and currently I'm working with GenVault in their biorepository, managing tissues, research samples, and finished good products.
Wonderful. Great for us to be able to get together and chat this morning. So let's talk about quality. I know there's a couple of topics that are very forefront in the industry at the moment. One of those being business continuity. We know with all of the technology advances that it becomes much more complex. How are you evaluating and being able to establish business continuity within the GenVault space, Heather?
In our space, it's really important to perform risk assessments very thoroughly. If you perform your risk assessments, identify your organizational risk, you're able to see where your weaknesses are, where you're open, more to have impact on client materials, security-wise, integrity-wise. And once we identify those risks, how are we going to mitigate those risks? And after identifying that, we can continue to lay out our plan for business continuity. So with backup systems, response plans, testing of those plans is really important to make sure that everyone's on the same page, to make sure all the risk is being identified so we can continue to provide services to our clients and protect materials.
Absolutely. And the testing of those plans, I think, is so important because things change. New risks come up all the time in the industry. Nothing is certain. Computers go down, systems go down. For some of your biorepository, some of the storage units may have an issue. And we know being prepared for that is so important. So Diligent helps to be able to understand those risks at a deeper level and provide that independent perspective. Sometimes we don't see a risk when we encounter it every day. So do you have situations like that, Heather, where you're finding that externals are providing insights that you haven't necessarily noticed internally?
Yeah, so like you said, Anthea, things are always changing. Your risks 2 years ago could change, today. The way that we identify the changes in risk is by having strong metrics. What are you measuring? Trends, reviewing data, how equipment is performing, nonconformances that are being reported through audits and inspections. They all kind of help direct you to evolve and continuously improve to reduce those risks from occurring. And we found that it's very important, not just for us to make sure that we're compliant with our process and procedures, but also our vendor partners. So you're going to need that partnership to help in those situations if systems go down, just to make sure your backup resources, HVAC, electrical, any other supplies to help support the business, that everyone's on the same page. So evaluating your vendors is very important as well as far as I see for risk mitigation, just to make sure that the whole picture is buttoned up and everything's been addressed, so there's no gaps in the processes and the support system.
Absolutely. Yeah, totally. And it's those gaps in processes, those handoffs between parts of the process. So, for example, when you're receiving samples and then making sure they get to the appropriate storage locations and storage temperatures, it's those gaps in the process, those handoffs that tend to cause the most challenges.
To me, one of the most important things to remember to address those gaps is practice. Everyone needs to understand their roles, responsibilities. So training is very important. And not just training, but practicing those drills and response plans, with your employees, with your vendors, so everyone understands the why behind what you're doing and how to accomplish it. If you're not doing things every day, we could not be readily available in your mind how to react to a situation. So it's really important to have those scheduled drills every 6 months, every quarter, depending on what the activity is. So everyone's ready to go any moment if something should fail or go wrong.
Absolutely, and you say training and practice
Mhm.
very important in those situations. To also enable the teams to be able to adapt if during a challenging situation that something different goes wrong.
Mhm.
We said that obviously everything changes sometimes almost on a daily basis, but enabling that practice and training really enables them to adapt as the situation evolves.
Yep, 100%.
Um, so another area that I think we as an industry, there are multiple sides of the coin on this. Is kappa. So when things do go wrong, that obviously documenting what happened, why it happened, how it happened, who was involved, and things like that. It's important, but you don't need a kappa for everything. What's your thoughts?
Yes, I agree with you. We do see a lot, audit responses and inspections where everyone's, where's your kappa at? And like you said, you don't want to have an overkill on kappa because then it's just becomes noise. You want an effective kappa
Mhm.
program that addresses the real issues that are going on. Um, I've seen it too, where somebody inadvertently there's like an outlier where you have somebody who forgot to do something, versus blaming the process as something with the process. It's just an outlier event that happened in a particular situation where you don't need a kappa to change the process. It might just be, I know everyone hates say it, but it might be refresher retraining. You don't want to overuse training, obviously, because
Totally.
that's not a great kappa. But at the same time, in some situations where you have those one or two things that happen every now and then, it's not effective to put changes in the process and overhaul everything just to have a kappa available to address that event. It's
I know that
it seems
there's
to
so
do the
many
opposite.
other ways to document things. I mean, to your
Yes,
initial point, sometimes it just needs a correction.
exactly.
Something happened, somebody
Yes.
did something that didn't follow process. Maybe we just need something to document what the correction is. And so you don't need to go through a full in-depth investigation,
Mhm.
root cause analysis, assign actions with responsibilities and timelines and things like that. But um, and it's always difficult, I think, for teams to find that balance on what really needs that kappa. And some of that is those complex situations where there's multiple factors playing into the situation, which could be part of a business continuity
Mhm.
situation. Obviously, if the actions taken, despite the training and practice, don't go according to plan, then that might be a good solution to look into things and use the kappa. But I totally agree; they're definitely not needed in every situation. Have you got any stories on when kappas when they were implemented that weren't really needed?
I would say yes, and it's more, I guess I would say, based on like client demand. So it's not really an internal thing. As long as everyone internally
Hmm.
understands the true meaning of kappa, um, we're okay. But when you start introducing other auditors on site, whether it be a third party accreditation auditor or a client, that's when you see those variables of not the full understanding of when a cap is needed and not needed. But you still have to provide that to respond appropriately to an audit. So we see most of our CAPAs that aren't as, I would say, robust in those certain situations
Hmm.
where, unfortunately, I don't like, again, to use training as a CAPA. But at times you're kind of forced to use that because of the situation, not really calling for a procedure or process update to address a minor finding or even a recommendation sometimes. So kind of fitting those situations into your QMS system and your CAPA program, sometimes it's hard to do when you're forcing it to happen. But again, we have to do our jobs. We have to address findings and respectively to our auditors, and sometimes that's what you see as a result are CAPAs that aren't as I don't want to say as effective, but they aren't as robust in content. They're kind of just, kind of short, simple, to the point, which would be like you called earlier an action. What was the immediate action to correct this issue? So to me, it's more of a corrective, not a corrective action, but immediate action
A
to
correction. Yeah.
respond to the issue versus a full CAPA response.
Totally. And for recommendations and minor observations,
Wow.
you should, any vendor should be able to just respond and say, okay, we acknowledge it. This is what we propose to do, or what we've
Okay.
already done. And let's all move on. We've got more important things to be able to focus on. It's
Yes.
when you get those, I think, cumulative minors where there's lots of little things that lead into it, that shows it's got a much more complex issue at stake. And you may need to have a more thorough investigation and root cause analysis. And I think, to be honest, root cause analysis is probably one of the most important parts of the CAPA. I know we've talked about before the number of tools that you use, I've frequently used a program called Taproot, which really gets down into things. And yes, it's not
Okay.
always about training. Sometimes it's just purely something wasn't communicated. What other tools have you been using to be able to truly understand the root of the problem?
I hate to say it, but it seems like I go back to the 5 whys. So going to
Oh,
the
always. Like a
so
3-year-old, I can ask
yeah,
why as long as you need.
there's so many tools out there and preferences of different tools, but when it comes down to it, digging down and saying, why did that happen? Well, what caused this and what caused that? Kind of drills down to what the real issue is.
Yes.
Sometimes you just hit that surface. Why did this happen? The employee, it was poor training. Well, why was there lack of training? Right? Is there a poor training program? Is there lack of resources to provide the proper training? So it's more, you have to really dig down to the why to get to the root cause if you want to address the underlying issue.
Totally. I had a situation where the team got together, and the first thing that came out in the meeting was, we need more training. Okay. We understand that that's the initial fallback. And it was when I was head of quality for a clinical research unit. And so everyone was, oh, we just need more training. And so we said, okay, well, let's talk about it a little more. And we got the sticky notes out, and we actually process mapped what should have happened and then what did happen using sticky notes, and then different colored sticky notes for the pieces that didn't go according to plan. Then we were able to use the root cause analysis tools, things like 5 Whys, Ishikawa diagrams, maybe even a Pharma, to be able to dive deeper. And it came out that training wasn't the problem at all. Something wasn't communicated to the team to let them know that a process changed. So they still completed, because there was a protocol, there was an updated protocol, and it hadn't been communicated to all of the team that they needed to follow a slightly different process. So it came down that, yes, the process wasn't able to be followed, the new process, because it hadn't been communicated. And so it turned out, yes, training plays a part quite often, but it's very rare that it's the true root cause of something. Have you got any other examples of where you've really not, or the team have not initially understood what really happened and what the cause of the problems were?
Yeah, we actually did have a similar event that happened recently where good documentation practices, everyone should understand how to document everything properly. But different departments handle documentation differently. It could be electronic records, hard copy records, sometimes a little bit of both. So we did realize that a lot of our vendor paperwork, third-party paperwork was very inconsistently, signed off. So the review was there, everything was documented properly, but it was kind of, like you said, a lot of minor findings that were accumulating that turned into a bigger issue. And then that's what we were seeing, like, where is the breakdown here? Why do we see this? And it took us reviewing all of our procedures and realizing that in all the procedures, it's kind of using different language of how to handle the paperwork instead of kind of giving real examples and as to why, for them to fully understand what the expectations were. So same thing with us. The communication, the expectation to me wasn't well defined. And this did require, a procedure update to kind of, the wording to be more explicit, specific to what their duties are. But not only that is getting together everyone as a group and giving real examples and refresher training, to me, I found the most effective. And everyone was able to answer questions. Well, what if this happens? And things that I didn't think of, in these situations, this person's out sick and I don't understand how to review this paperwork and I can't review it. So it goes undocumented. What do I do then? So a lot of people opened up with their questions and concerns in it for real life examples. And it helped us define the process even better of hearing those gaps to make sure we close them.
Exactly. I mean, to one of the earlier points we made, it's if each team has their own process, but the processes don't link together well, that's where those inconsistencies can really come about. Because if all the teams aren't talking the same language, then the understanding, the communication isn't effective. It's always important, always interesting to really look into the root causes of things. In one of the programs that I use, the Taproot, one of the phrases in there is that a procedure was creatively misinterpreted. And that's my favorite scenario in the whole questioning set that we use for that approach.
It's always easy to say it's in the procedure, just follow the procedure. That's the easiest way to say it. But then you got to see who your audience is, who's reading procedures, how are they interpreting this information, and everyone's interpreting differently. So that's when there's an issue of communication through procedures to all personnel, of how they use it. So it's very
in the clinical
important
space, we talk about consent forms being at an 8th grader level. But it's important that the SOPs are written at the right level for the team members who are actually going to be performing the task.
Exactly.
I have a problem where the language I use is quite often more complex, bigger words and things like that. And I have to dial it back to make sure that it needs to be understood by everybody who needs to be able to follow the process.
And to get those get the feedback from your colleagues, from the employees, is important to help develop the process. They feel like they had, a part of that development and say in, so they're more likely to follow the processes that they had a buy-in to develop. So I think it's important to, interview everyone in the company, depending what process you're developing, to get their feedback to make it their process. This way it's more understandable and everyone knows how to communicate it out more effectively.
Totally. It's making sure that there's practicality in the quality side of things. Yeah, we can write procedures all day, but if the team can't follow them and actually perform the activities. I mean, this kind of brings everything almost that quality is about is we try and put procedures in place to be able to help the team. But if we're not effective in having the right procedures in place, then we're not setting them up as a success. And so then we end up with deviations or CAPAs or non-conformances because things didn't go according to plan. And then that impacts the business continuity. And everything just comes full circle. So quality is so interwoven into everything. It really needs to be a real culture of quality and people thinking the same way, so that we are setting both the business and the team members up for success. Um, any other thoughts around all of our quality processes and how they're interlinked to be able to head everyone up for success?
I think another key point for success is after you roll out the processes and everyone's trained on the processes, to make sure that follow up is there to see if there's any room to
Effectiveness
continuously
check.
develop your processes to, like you said earlier, keep up with those new risks.
Mhm.
Quality department, you know, to me, one of our key roles is having that partnership with operations and just seeing how they're performing their tasks. Not to be, you know, managing them, micromanaging them, but being that partner to see if everything is effectively working and going as it should, identifying any rooms for improvement and documenting those trends to keep an eye on them. So once the processes are established, it's important to make sure that everyone's following them in a consistent manner. And if not, you know, what is the underlying issue?
Absolutely. You're totally right. The effectiveness check is another real key part
Hmm.
of the whole process, because you may have gone through this whole investigation, but you may have missed one key area
Hmm.
that was really root to the problem. And all the actions under the sun aren't going to improve it if that situation occurs again. So, yes, effectiveness checks going back in and that continuous improvement mindset,
Yes.
that making sure that just because the process is one of my hated words, I think, is historical. We've always done it that way.
Oh,
Okay,
yeah.
but is that the best way now? We may have new risk factors that need to be accommodated, or we're working with new team members, new roles within the process. So that what we've done in the past may not be the most effective way going forward. So that continual improvement mindset is so important in everything that we do.
I would agree with you. One of the things too that we do where we're flexible at GenVault is when we are rolling out more complex products, I'm sorry, procedures or major updates to procedures or even a new procedure, we tend to focus on those topics more frequently than we would prior to the rollout. So if we perform, for example, a security check, um, once a week or once a month, and we roll out something that's really changed as far as security and how you need to access the building, or
Mhm.
you know, we have biometric fingerprint readers now to get in and out of doors. So once you roll out something new, it's just having those inspections more frequent for a matter of time, whether it be 6 months to make sure everything, you know, rolled out properly, to identify things early on before they become a problem, and then pulling back and then maybe going back to your normal schedule of once a month versus once a week. So just, you know, having quality partner again with the operational team when there's something new rolled out to the team to make sure everyone understands what the process is and provide that guidance.
Absolutely, because new processes, they take time for people to
Hmm.
become comfortable with them, and for it to become that regular mindset. Yes, security is a great example of remembering that you've got to use your biometric rather than a badge or something like that. And that can also be a time saving, in terms of them not having to, or each process can actually help the efficiency of an overall situation. But no, you're absolutely right that I think quality is often viewed as the police, but we're not.
Yes.
We're actually there to
Yes.
help them. We're there to be able to guide them through the process. And as I said earlier, to set them up for success.
Hmm.
But we're not always viewed that way.
Yes. We try
I
our
know when
best.
I started at a new company, after I'd read my SOPs, I then actually went and worked in the operational areas for a while. I went up and got to know the team. And a couple of people said to me, "Why are you here?" I said, well, if I don't understand what it is that you need to do every day,
Hmm.
how can I make sure that the procedures and things are set up so that we don't need all these CAPAs and deviations in place? And they said, well, I've never thought about it that way. And it's a case of, well, if we can work together, if
Hmm.
we can help each other be able to understand what their challenges are, so that when things do go awry, that we can all work together to be able to find solutions rather than start pointing fingers at each other.
Exactly.
Um,
The relationship is better to get, valid information. You have that trust established and you collaborate together to come up, with a better way to do things.
Absolutely. Um, Well, it's been wonderful chatting with you, Heather. But I think we're of like minds in terms of what quality means to us and to our
Mhm.
team members. Any closing comments around quality?
I would say it's very important to have everyone's buy-in in quality. Like you said, have that quality program that works for everybody, not just for quality. So,
Yes,
it's everyone has the knowing of why we do things, how we do things, and if something goes wrong, how do we handle it together? So I think it's very important to have that teamwork environment to have a successful quality program.
absolutely. And the openness on both sides. I think
Definitely.
transparency, especially when things go wrong.
Hmm.
I know when I do root cause, I first start off with, I'm not trying to point fingers. I'm not trying to
Hmm.
say that anyone actually did anything wrong.
Yes.
We're looking at the situation. Let's work together and understand the situation. Well, as I said, wonderful to chat with you today, and I look forward to continuing the partnership between Diligent in terms of some quality oversight and performing a qualification assessment for
Mhm.
GenVault, and for GenVault to continue to grow in the biorepository space so that we can continue to have those samples stored that are so critical for clinical trials.
Yeah, as do I. And this partnership really works. And it was nice speaking with you today. And thank you for your time.
Wonderful. Thanks, Heather.